Well, thank you everybody for attending. Today's presentation is called Transforming Procurement into a Business Center of Excellence. My name is Pierre Mitchell. I'm the Managing Director at Spend Matters. We're the leading procurement technology research and advisory firm. And I'm going to be your moderator for the event. And I'm very excited to have with me a little bit of a cough, but also Julio Zimbron, who's our CPO from Albea, as well as Pierre Lapre, who's the CEO of Barangusta. And let me just do some quick introductions, and we're going to get into the meat of today's presentation. So Julio, would you like to do a quick introduction of yourself on your side?
Yeah, sure. Julio Zimbron, I am the CPO of Albea, joining the business about 4 years ago. Before that, a long career, more than 30 years in industry, mostly in a number of industries, but mostly in automotive, working for Valeo, working for Visteon, Federal Mogul, spending sometimes in food industry in Europe, and sometime also in train for Bombardier. And very happy to be here. And most of my career, about 2/3 of my career in different roles, mostly in procurement, supply chain, purchasing, whatever is the fashion name at this stage. Very glad to be here. I'm very glad. Thank you, Pierre, for the invitation.
Yes, thank you, Julio, for making time. The opportunity and cost of your time is high, so thank you. So, Pierre Lapre, a quick introduction from you.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Pierre Lapre. I'm the founder and the CEO of Barangusta. More interestingly, perhaps, I'm a former procurement director. I was the right hand for the global CPO for the Adecco Group. And when I founded Barangusta, it was really to solve a pain that I, as a practitioner, had, and me and my team. So yeah, we come from the world of procurement to hopefully deliver some good solutions, and we're headquartered in Lyon, in France.
Great, thank you, Pierre. Okay, so our objectives for today's session is we're going to learn a little bit about Albea and how they worked to unite procurement within to create a center-led community and a decentralized organization using their one procurement model. We'll talk a little bit about processes and practices, and really how do you scale procurement and do a transformation in a highly innovative and decentralized and global organization. So without further ado, just a quick word, Pierre, maybe just say I think you have just a couple slides here quickly about Barangusta for those who are not familiar with your organization and what you do.
Yes, and I promise this won't be a sales pitch, but just to set the frame on our collaboration with Albea. So Barangusta is a procurement performance management solution that serves more than 100 mid-cap and enterprise clients across the globe. Basically, we help our clients track their strategic sourcing pipeline, manage their team, and report to the C-suite on their contribution in a transparent manner. Basically, we bring accountability through clear governance and transparent figure, collaboration within the procurement team, but also with the broader stakeholder community. And because you have better things to do than implement solutions, implementing procurement performance solution like ours is a matter of weeks, not months, and also to integrate that, okay? The key is it has to be agile.
Yep, and Pierre, let me just ask you a quick question. So for those of you just not familiar kind of with the overall landscape, can you just differentiate a little bit about like why companies use your solution versus a kind of source to pay, traditional solution, and kind of how you layer on top, or kind of the differentiation?
Yeah, so when you look at the whole procurement value chain from the strategy all the way down to procure to pay, we found that traditional suites are good at transacting or running RFPs, but not so much at handling the more strategic part of the job. So PPM, procurement performance management, is exactly about that. It's about orchestrating the various activities that your team is doing in order to be more efficient and bring greater transparency into your contribution. And clearly, we do work in conjunction within your existing technology as a kind of overarching layer on top of your existing solution. And as a fun fact is that out of our more than 100 clients, with the exception of 2 clients, and Julio being actually the first one, we have not replaced anything else than Excel or SharePoint. So clearly, this is something that is missing on the market today. So in the next two slides, it's just to give you a very quick look at how it works concretely. But basically, it's all about your team building the pipeline at the beginning of the year for the more strategic things, and throughout the year as the business has new requests. And this becomes the entry point for your buyers, the single source of truth also for your manager to see how the team is doing, but also with finance to see and validate the results. So of course, there is a very extensive suite of reporting that will give you all you need to know, from the more mundane financial reporting all the way to a lot more advanced insights, for example, on the levers that drive the bigger value, or how you utilize the team. I'm done with that, but I think it was important to give you this high-level view on what we do. It will shed a good light on how Julio is using it with his team.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. So, well, let's talk a little bit about kind of how the strategic side in terms of the broad objectives that the business has and that procurement has. If you look at the recent Deloitte CPO report, which just came out, it was about 400 CPOs or so. I was actually one of the co-authors on that with Deloitte. They brought me in as a guest researcher, if you will. One of the things that's interesting is you can kind of see that the objectives are very diverse. I mean, obviously we have efficiency and cost as kind of, continuing to be an important core value proposition, but then you get into the next ones, digital transformation, which, can mean a lot of things, but it includes customer facing, transformation activity, innovation, new products and services, as well as risk and compliance and CSR, and then other things, in terms of, top line growth, et cetera. That's quite a diverse, mix of things. And the things that really are huge right now, they're really hot, are risk and CSR and digital transformation, because it means so much to so many people, but very much a CEO kind of objective in terms of introducing, improving top line growth. And so with that, Julio, I just, maybe you can reflect on those priorities, relative to Albéa, and maybe just talk a little bit about your, transformation, and take us into a day in the life of, or a year in the life of Julio. So that'd be great. Thanks.
I think in the life of Julio is very complicated now, because we are missing materials all around the globe, so it's not funny that much. Albéa, we initiate a transformation plan on the procurement area. We name it procurement, but it basically is purchasing, in 2017 through a survey with the different stakeholders. We realized that the purchasing team was delivering financial results, was working in some improvements in the traditional quality cost delivery model, but then the needs of the company has been changing. We have this famous word, the VUCA word, was coming very strongly at that time in our company. So we realized that we need to move a step forward, and that's what we have initiate. We started with a survey because we wanted to associate to us the stakeholders, what were their needs, what were the main priorities to move forward, and how purchasing will support that. And that's what we have done. We have realized that in addition to what we were making well in terms of delivering and management of a database and etc., we want to maintain that, because a purchasing central group which is not delivering financials, we have an issue. So we need to keep that. But also we have found that there were 3 or 4 drivers coming more and more as a challenge in the marketplace. One was the innovation to NPD, especially in our business. Our business is packaging, mostly for oral care, fashion, etc. And was the necessity to evolve to a more responsible packaging. And responsible packaging meaning how to reduce the carbon footprint, how to reduce the usage of fossil plastics, etc. So this was one thing that necessarily goes back to the supply chain, and then purchasing need to be an active participant on that. Second one, yeah, yes.
No, go ahead. No good.
And this is also included in what we name it globally corporate social responsibility. More and more, the world is changing, and it's good because now we have this challenge to move to corporate social responsibility about working well, people, environment, people taking care of people, and protection of laws, responsibility, and furthermore. So this was a second important element: how to include our supplier base on that, how to make evolve our supply chain on that way. The third one was the digitalization. Uh, I take note of the comment from Pierre at the beginning saying we have more interesting things to do than to put systems. And at that time, we were using another systems which were demanding a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of Excel sheets, etc. I won't name it because it's not purpose. Then we realized that we also need to move our transformation internally in processes, but also to automatize and digitalize that and effectively make it easier. And I need to say that when we have moved forward on that, our objective was to have a tool which is simple, easy, and that we can make evolve very rapidly. So that's what I will say on what motivates us to move on the next step forward in our model.
So Julio, it sounds like a good practical step is you got the voice of the internal stakeholder, and they were reflecting the voice of the external customers and the consumers and regulators and all these things. And so you got that. But in terms of actually getting alignment by changing your measurements and getting out of the procurement box of just doing deals and pushing POs and things like that. Any actions or recommendations that you would recommend to folks to get that better alignment with the business to kind of broaden that value proposition to align to these more important enterprise goals?
I think there are two elements that are critical. The first one is to build the strategy together with the stakeholders. You cannot do it in your side and come and inform and deploy because that won't work. It's good to hear them, but also when you are working in the model to interact, to define together what is the right way to go in that direction and to get aligned, because sometimes they will ask you A, you have choose B, and perhaps there is a third way when both of you will find an effective way of working. So I will say my first recommendation is work together with your stakeholders. To work alone won't fly. Is better to have them on board since the very beginning. And secondly, I remember a friend who say the first thing is team, the second thing is team, the third thing is team. So the team is important, and the team. I have a team, global team of about 70 persons around the globe, and I know each of them well. I used to travel some years ago, and to understand the people, to know them personally, to know their own constraints in the region, their own constraints in the categories, their own constraints in their business model, but also their own drivers as a person. And then you cannot manage a person who the driver is the professional life like you drive a person who driver is the I don't know the family work, the family life. Sorry. So I think both things are critical, and I think well, I don't want to be unmodest, but has been critical and instrumental to be successful implementing this model.
Yeah, no, that's great. Sounds like that the notion of kind of empathy, understanding your stakeholders, being with them. Hopefully, we can be with them on site more and more, and just getting alignment with them on a shared objective. And Pierre, let me bring you into this. So what you work with a lot of companies and you see how they kind of do their transformations, but what's your perspective on how you can try to get scalability and standardization around the strategic aspects around the project portfolio and the KPIs, even though the projects vary, the lens, it might vary by category. Just give me a little bit of a sense as to some of the you see across multiple companies around scaling this.
So that's a very interesting question, and what we've tried to do and what we advocate with our client is start simple, because we live in very complex organizations, and yeah, when you're negotiating your insurance, MRO, and raw materials, these are things that are vastly different. But what remains at the core of that is you're managing a portfolio of initiatives. You know who, when, where, what, how much, and so on. And so stick to that. The first point is, how do we bring everybody together, not only within the procurement community, but also with the broader business community. And if you give tools to help people organize, help people understand what's going on and when, you start fostering the collaboration. And with the transparency, people will start, I would say, trust each other a bit more. And I don't like this notion of trust, but there's something to it. It's how do we turn procurement into something that is not a black box to the business? And as soon as you start doing this, that's how you accelerate the transformation, because again, you bring everybody together. And so that's where we help our client. And I hinted at that earlier. We come on top of other procurement technology because there are things that are very specific, very vertical, and we don't want to replace that, but we want, again, to orchestrate that. And this management or monitoring layer that we add on top of that is an enabler and an accelerator, a catalyst, I would say, for that transformation.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, Julio, to that point in terms of this orientation to kind of, let's say, the internal customer and the business units, and I think you call them clusters. Maybe just talk a little bit about your alignment model, because it seems a really important way to kind of align to the business and put the the stakeholder at the center, and then bring in the appropriate category management structures and support structures. Maybe just talk a little bit about how you kind of do that.
Yeah, that's exactly a good comparison. For us, the cluster is the voice of the customer within the company, and the cluster could be a region, the cluster could be a product line, the cluster could be a mix of both. But they are speaking for the customer, speaking for the market, speaking for the needs of our basically customers. Then they are in the center of our organization, and they are the way that we decide to link that with our own strategy in purchasing was to have a cluster manager of purchasing who is the pivotal line, the pivotal angle, mixing both. I mean, putting in relationship both, putting in relationship the feedback that we have from the cluster in terms of orientations of the market, in terms of needs of the market, in corporate social responsibility, in responsible packaging, etc., feeding that and feeding our own strategy. We build our strategy based on that. And in the other way around, we have some constraints at group level, we have some constraints in manufacturing, we have some constraints in purchasing market that we need to provide to the cluster in order to make the right balance. So the role of the cluster lead is a little bit complicated, but is really challenging, because he's the one who is making these arrangements and putting together and speaking to both, and eventually putting together both sides to communicate and to get aligned in how to move forward. Sometimes central procurement need to step back, say, yeah, I cannot go there because it's very regional. They have their own constraints. My role will be coaching, supporting good practices, and so on. Other way around, if the category is critical for the group, and for example, CapEx is critical, and we have global agreements with main suppliers, well, how we can extend that to the cluster to make it beneficial of that. So the role of the sourcing cluster lead is the critical in our structure. And then we associate in one side the categories, transversal categories supporting that, the good practices supporting that, evidently some financial control and support. And on the other hand, they are bringing us all the needs and all the requirements from the cluster in front of the customer. So this is basically how we have put it together. So yeah. Below, you can see that we support with category approach. We have decided voluntarily to have not too many critical categories, but the categories that we have are counting for more than half of the spend. And we have also decided to have some indirect transversal categories per region, trying to find synergies where we can, not too many categories neither, because in some cases, there is no synergies to find between regions in indirects. And evidently, at the end of the day, the financial control. And this role of financial control, I will go deeper later because it's also the one helping us with the corporate social responsibility roadmap and also with the evolution of the digitalization that we are doing in our organization.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And I like how you, it's interesting, the models, people have different models, but you seems like you've kind of delegated some of the center of excellence support around market intelligence and negotiation, things like, to the global category leads. In other cases around SRM, you've kind of really connected the suppliers really directly in with the cluster leads to the business to really make sure that the suppliers are able to really meet the needs of the business and to guide that. And then the category managers are kind of, driving that strategic view of the market, et cetera, and making sure that, they're kind of doing what good category managers do. But you also have this bucket on control, MDM, CSR. Is that layer kind of, are you working with IT or your quality or sustainability groups or other kind of folks in the enterprise to support, what you're doing with these individual teams, for data management and regulatory things? Is that kind of that bottom layer?
That role is basically a coordination role because, like in statistic process control in the shop floor, we want the accountability and the responsibility of these elements in the buyer. So the buyer is responsible also for the corporate social responsibility of their suppliers. He's accountable also for the digital part that he's working on, and is also responsible for the database. However, this role is coordinating the good practices, coordinating the processes. We have found that to do this model implementation was very important to have processes, and we have start from scratch in some cases or to adapt massively some processes that you used to have in order to make it shorter, simpler, but going again with the new needs of the company. So we have implemented a roadmap for corporate social responsibility. We have implemented a way to work on digitalization, and it's then when we have choose Perangusta to support us, to help us on that. And the good thing is that the digitalization that we have story, we have been capable to make it evolving and start to put together, like in a brick, the different elements. Now, for example, we are capable to have our information systems, the connection with Dun & Bradstreet and the connection with the EcoVadis, and then we can have now track the corporate social note of our different suppliers. We are not still there. We have a very big supplier base, about 7,000 suppliers, but we have a critical definition of suppliers of about 1,000, and we have a plan to evaluate our suppliers' corporate social responsibility in the next 3 years, up to 1,000 suppliers. But yes, right. This role is basically the link between the IT or the regulatory affairs or the corporate social responsibility leadership into the supplier base.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Pierre, let me ask you a question. I mean, certainly companies have kind of, different models on how they do their category management and, things like this in terms of how they, define their categories and managing them. And Julio, your point around this with Dun & Bradstreet, this outside-in intelligence and content, that's very much like category management, right? Which is let the supply markets kind of inform you about like how you can kind of get value from them. But Pierre, maybe just tell me a little bit about what you've seen customers do in terms of using the solution to manage projects outside of just core, sourcing project, the sourcing factory, if you will, to, do kind of improvement projects or just, any trends that you're seeing in how folks are kind of, managing the strategic procurement process versus the execution side.
So we're seeing a few different things, and I would put them somehow into some kind of maturity curve. So clearly we start with the pure sourcing projects where the ultimate benefit in the end is financial, either cost avoidance or cost savings. But as the teams grow and as the team mature, they start onboarding different initiatives. For example, one that bring non-financial or not directly financial benefits. We're starting to work with a client on tracking the impact on CO2 emissions of procurement initiative. So you cut costs, but you also cut emissions. So we're starting to have a more complete and not only financial view on the performance and the contribution of procurement. And one interesting thing happens generally shortly after that is because the platform brings transparency, you can invite your stakeholders, you can invite finance to the platform to see what's going on, to see what you're doing for them. And it's very funny because initially people don't care. I mean, let's face it, okay, it's another tool, it's a tool for procurement, whatever. But the first one will start getting there to put a comment or see what's going on, and they will want some more. And so just like that, you start increasing again the collaboration, and you bring the people together. And once you've achieved that, and we've seen that already with a few clients, the usage of the platform starts to be used for broader action plans. That could be enterprise-wide cost reduction plans. Okay, how do we limit the rate, the amount of scrap on the shop floor? Because there's money in there. How do we reduce consumption of electricity somewhere? So all these initiatives start to be funneled into the platform to get a broader view. And we have a few clients who also use us for transformation plans, because you somehow always expect some benefit from that. And the more interesting use we've seen so far of the platform is how do we use that in a post-M&A context to reap the synergies, the benefits of the synergies. And so that's absolutely perfect because you have two procurement organizations joining forces, and that's a good way to get complete visibility and see where you can consolidate, where you need to retain the two things. And that's the best way to defend a business case and to justify the ROI of whatever initiatives you're embarking on.
Yeah. It's funny. It goes back to actually how we, the title that we put on the webinar was kind of getting this enterprise center of excellence, and it is interesting. I have seen this, quite a bit where you start to procurement does this. They get their kind of act under control, if you will, and suddenly IT starts saying, well, gosh, I want better forward visibility on my IT project portfolio, and of course that's what you want is alignment, right? And we have a little box down there, Julio. I'm going to bring you here. I'm going to bring you into the conversation here, in a second. But there's another client I had, big CPG company. They got 5,000 supply chain projects that they track in their PMO, in their project management organization, and they make sure that they're kind of connecting the dots between them and making sure that there's not duplication of effort. And so you start expanding this view of the portfolio, and it starts becoming more and more strategic and more enterprise focus. And here you have other people in the business emulating what procurement's doing, which is kind of a cool thing. But anyway, Julio, what would you like to offer up here in terms of how to facilitate maybe better information sharing and transparency within procurement, let's say across the categories and the clusters, or outside of procurement? Any kind of just lessons learned on using the transparency to then create better alignment with the different groups?
I think the major learning here for us was you cannot try to do everything. This is a failure. And then we concentrate in the categories, in the critical categories, to give that expertise across the organization. But also we realized that there are a number of regional categories or cluster categories which are very, very specific to that. There we have empowered buyers to work on those. So we have a hybrid model. We have a model where in the critical categories we are transversal and giving expertise, but also the regional or cluster where they are working not alone, because it's freedom in a frame within certain good practices that the group is ensuring, but giving the possibility to be reactive, to be rapid, to improve the time to market, because this is one of the targets that in our company we have, where our business is very, very tough in terms of necessity to react, flexibility, time to market. So we wanted to have, yes, influence, but not to reduce the speed to the market. and then having that accountability in the regions and being transparent. Here, guys, you can do it by yourself, but we are working together with you to give the frame that gives accountability and transparency, and the purchasing community take it well. But furthermore, the management community take it very well, because they say, okay, I have not a group just imposing me top down the things. I own that, and I'm transparent on that, and I work on that with the support of the group, and vice versa. We work transversally with the support of the clusters. I think this is for me the major learning in terms of sharing data, transparency, and going further now to the digitalization. Now there is no secrets. A buyer in Indonesia who want to see what is doing his counterpart in Europe for a particular initiative, now don't go to the system, and he can say, he's doing this initiative, why I cannot do it or replicate it? Cross-fertilization. Well, I will call him, hey, how you're doing that? That works for me. Yes, that works for you. And then they start to interact. I think interaction and accountability are two major things that we can get through this transparency.
Yeah, that's really great insight. I was just thinking about someone like HP, and what they did around having, different operating models depending on the nature of the category. So for, direct materials and resins and things, they had that within the big business units, and then for other things, they had that at corporate. So what's nice is that transparency, can show different kind of operating models, but you still have a scalable kind of, infrastructure for the scorecards and the projects and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, please.
No, sorry, and I was about to make a silly comparison, but it's pretty much like the food court in a mall. Okay, you want to come together. You don't want to eat the same thing. And in that case, you don't work in the same way across categories or region. But you need a central place where you can all meet together and actually share the lunch. And that's really the idea. Is it takes a village somehow to elevate the maturity of procurement, and that's different geographies, different categories. But everybody in the central place. That's the only way to progress. And I love what Julio said about cross-fertilization, because that's what we want to enable and to facilitate. That's where you'll get the value, and the value beyond just the savings.
Yeah. No, I love that. By the way, you've given me a completely new metaphor that I hadn't learned before. So I'm learning here on the fly as well, Pierre. So we have the food court. So everybody's got to eat at lunch, and everybody's hungry for value and savings, but bringing everybody together, you can do so much more, and there's a strong, human connection and team connection there. So anyway, you're going to see that in a future blog post at some point. So, okay. And I will credit you. So let's talk a little bit about CSR. So obviously, if you're going to be stakeholder driven and the stakeholders are listening to the consumers, et cetera, CSR is a major, kind of priority here. So Julio, can you just tell us a little bit about your journey here and how customer experience and what employees want and what the consumers want, and then the regulation piece of it, obviously, but how have those been kind of coming together and impacting you in your day-to-day in terms of, what you're doing in procurement? Is it through, supplier relationship, supplier management for the risk and quality? How did it really start to manifest itself in terms of your day-to-day and your transformation?
Thank you. I will focus the next two slides in two major drivers for us in the current organization is corporate social responsibility and responsible packaging, but this is very specific for us. Regarding corporate social responsibility, the world is changing, and that's a fact, and it's good that it's changing. The priorities that the young generations and consumers are giving now to how it's done, where it's done, how is people been working on that, etc., is becoming a must. Yes, in purchasing, we used to have our quality, cost, and delivery indicators, typically the scorecards and etc. But this is now a must. The quality is a must. They simply need to deliver quality. The suppliers, they simply need to be competitive, and then they simply need to deliver in time. But now they need to do all of that, taking care of the people, taking care of the environment, taking care of the world, if I can say like that. So in our journey in Albea, this is our pillars of creating a positive future. So we are talking about 11 pillars going from health and safety, etc. Some of them which are internal, some of them which are external with customers, the responsible packaging, like ability to innovate, etc. And how we can articulate and maintain both. And it's there where supplier relationship is important, and I will respond your question. The approach to the suppliers is changing now. It's not only a matter to buy cheap and good and in time. Now we need to take care of how they are doing the stuff, how our supply chain is working together. No, that slide. We can remain in the first slide. Yeah, and is there where now we are adjusting. If I make it simple for all the buyers that we have, all the colleagues that we have here, we always think quality, cost, delivery, scorecard, etc. But now we need to adjust a very important element, which is the corporate social responsibility. That is a must. That is something that need to do. And the way to do it, you have different ways. Albea has chosen EcoVadis and Intertech. EcoVadis for the social for a CCR audit and the indicators. And in the event that we have some critical suppliers which are not getting there, we have auditing physically on site through Intertech. This is the way that we have chosen to go. I will talk later, but this is the major change. We have integrated in the scorecard, and as a critical element, I can tell you, Pierre, Michel, that if a supplier consistently is not improving the note after a year in terms of EcoVadis, we are putting the supplier out of the panel. We are putting the supplier in probation, okay? Because we really believe on that, and our customers believe on that, and moreover, the consumers believe on that, and they want that. They want that the product is responsible, that the people is being well treated, and that we are not using things which are impacting the world. So I will say the corporate social responsibility becomes now a decision element in the supplier relationship management. That's for sure.
Right. So it sounds like you're putting it's not just a not just check the supplier code of conduct, but you're really putting some teeth into the agreements and into the scorecard to really measure that very explicitly as part of their performance.
Correct. Now, if we move to the next slide, thank you. So this is a little bit of marketing for my company. Don't get me wrong, don't call me on that. But what we believe is responsible packaging is based of three things, which is safe for people, which is having a minimal impact on resources, impacting the world, and which is circular. And for us, circular is extremely important. Circular is not only that is recyclable, is not only which is coming from recyclability, is that is doing the complete circle. And that is reduction, recycling, and recyclable. So for us in purchasing, this is a major impact because, for example, we are buying a lot of fossil plastics, resins, and we are buying from the big guys, BASF, Total, you name it. And the customers doesn't want that any longer. They want to have now recyclable post-consumer resins. They want to have less plastic. They want to have materials that you can send to the selective selection of after post-consumer, and that you can reuse it, because unfortunately still today you have some plastics that go to the yellow bin in France or wherever in Europe and are not possible to recover because they are very small or they are another material, etc. So for us, we are working on that to give to our customers, so to the final consumer, a responsible packaging having these three elements. And for us in purchasing is to provide the supply chain who can respond to this responsible packaging. And again, this is another criteria of decision. If we have a material which is not recyclable or which is not coming from recyclability or is not circular, we are choosing those materials less and less, and consequently impacting our supplier relationship management for sure.
Yep. And yeah, it's really interesting. Times have changed. I just saw a commercial on television, and it was for makeup, and they were talking about recyclable packages, and that the product itself was vegan. I never really thought about, makeup being vegan, but I do know that we throw away a lot of, a lot of cosmetics in this household, having a few consumers here, and I think it's terrific. It's great that the consumers and now the companies like your organizations are working to kind of to bring the sustainability and then the CSR into the supply chain. So Pierre, I just want to make sure I'm bringing you in on this, and then we're going to get into just a little deep dive into the scorecard. Julian, and how you kind of make that real. But Pierre, any just comments on what you're seeing with other clients with regards to? I know obviously Europe is a little more progressive and socially minded than here, here in the U.S. But just any comments on your side?
Clearly, this is being a trend everywhere, and so being originally from Europe and going now more and more in the US, there are other trends, I would say. So diversity is huge in the US, and we're not there yet, almost at all in Europe. And maybe we go a bit further at the moment in terms of sustainability and circularity than in the US. But overall, I think that the wheels are in motion now. And I think that everything will converge at one step toward people, planet, and of course profit, because you need to fuel all of that. So we see a whole lot of initiatives, and again, the question is, how do we ensure that we know what we're doing and that we follow through all these initiatives to ensure that they actually deliver some results, and how do we socialize those results in the organization? How do we explain that procurement is doing a few things, and not only for the money, but it also helps the broader objective, the broader CSR objectives of the company. And this morning I was in another webinar where people are starting to integrate the cost of carbon. There's an internal cost of carbon into the company, and so when you make a sourcing decision, well, you somehow readjust your business case based on that internal cost of the ton of CO2. So this is going everywhere, and clearly that's one of the very reasons why we are now expanding the solution to non-financial performance. That could be anything. Clearly, right now, CO2 emissions are all the rage, so we're focusing on that. But you can extend that. I mean, in a company like Albea, I suppose that water consumption is also a thing. We have a client who's also starting to track the amount of waste from their operation that they can recycle or not. So all these things are becoming stronger and stronger. And as usual, procurement is an interface between the business and the market and the outside world. And so we need to be there to learn from our supplier, from our supply chain, what we could do better. And it takes two to dance. So as soon as you have a structured approach to managing your pipeline or your portfolio of initiatives, then it frees up a lot of time and a lot of, how can I say that, the time for your brain to actually have meaningful conversations with the supplier. So yeah, we do the grunt work of managing the portfolio so that our client can actually do the funny things of talking and finding solutions. So yeah.
And it also creates that differentiation too, as you do some really innovative types of things. I mean, some of the most innovative areas right now, just within procurement supply chain, are around packaging and digital and these types of things. And you're right, Pierre. The lens of risk and compliance seems to change, with the wins, but certainly there is an increasing focus on transparency into to diversity inclusion, to greenhouse gas emissions, to all of these things. And that it's serious when it starts getting baked into the accounting standards, not just the sustainability ratings, but starting to actually show up within financial accounting kind of standards. Then it's for real when when finance starts driving the bus on this. So Julio, maybe just talk a little bit about what's really interesting here is you're starting to really not just track these KPIs with the suppliers, but now you're really making this very transparent. So now you can show this to your customers and regulators, just like Apple publishes, it just came out with its latest annual report. I don't know how much you guys consider those things, but any other kind of cases for change that you would recommend here to the listeners about how what you're doing in the trenches actually matters more strategically as you go through it?
Conscious of time, I will go fast on this slide. Perhaps I won't go deeper on that. But just commenting on your side, the name of the game has changed for us, and we need to understand that. Depending on the maturity of the activity sector, will come later or soon, but it will come because the things are changing. So sustainability, carbon footprint, etc. All of that for Albea is corporate social responsibility. And in this case, we have a roadmap to move forward, auditing our suppliers and taking decisions about the supplier relationship management. So for me, is the major learning, and it will continue like that, is to accept that now is a need and is as important or more than quality, than price, than other stuff. In some cases, still the customers are not accepting the price, which is normal. It's just a ramp up of understanding, but that will come. And I will say that for me, conscious of time, because I would like to stop on this comment here, because we have only 12 minutes. Perhaps there will be some questions. To say we need to put those indicators, whatever you decide, sustainability, circularity, corporate social responsibility, whatever is the name you're giving, you need to include that in your supplier relationship management and scorecard, because now your purchasing decision need to be based also on those.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now, well, you mentioned it here on the question side in terms of just for the audience questions. So as I think the attendees have been being encouraged to submit some of your questions here in the chat. And I apologize, I probably should have mentioned that on the front end of the webinar to kind of submit your questions. So while some are starting to come in, Pierre, maybe just maybe I'll just ask the question, to you. Is there anything that we haven't really talked here? I mean, we've kind of focused on the CSR side, but I know that supplier innovation is really a big thing, right, in terms of independent of the CSR aspect. But any other kind of major initiatives or requirements that your customers are asking you for that's impacting how you're developing kind of your solution to accommodate some of these broader requirements?
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing a lot more is a lot of our clients are asking us the question of, hey, we have this solution or that type of content, can we bring that together? And so Julio is talking about the credit scoring, the CSR rating with EcoVadis. So we managed to pull all that information. We integrate with a great UK company called Darkbeam. They measure the exposure of your supply chain to cyber threats. Okay, and so when you start to pull all the data, so you bring the transactional data from the ERP or the P2P, you bring credit scoring, you bring CSR, you bring cyber threats, you bring modern slavery, and suddenly you start painting a slightly more complete picture of your supplier. And sometimes you can find out that a supplier is great from the technical or commercial perspective, but they're nowhere near as good as they should be on those aspects around CSR. So it gives you a more complete view that will drive the action. Okay, so we need to put an action plan with these guys so that they become better citizens. And again, we believe in one thing. We're good. Our strong point is procurement performance management. We're not good at CSR, so we don't want to build a half-baked solution that will be the wrong answer to the wrong problem. We'd rather integrate and partner with other people so that our client can choose the best solution on one specific segment for their needs, and we bring that all together. And I mean, this is what we call best of breed ultimately, but the technology has evolved, the market has evolved, and now it becomes very easy. So clearly the focus is there is how do we bring all of that together in a cohesive view.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we're getting some questions here, and there's maybe a recurring theme about kind of and this is my question for you, Julio, in terms of not so much the hard ROI, and we can think about the the triple bottom line and all those things, but in terms of sustainability and such. But you have to sell this new set of capabilities and transformation just like anything else, right? And only so much can be funded. How did you kind of build some of the harder business case elements, or obviously it's like, okay, it's risk, we have to do it, our major customer says we have to do it. Some things you might not need as much kind of business case justification, but any recommendations or just lessons learned on what you did to make the investment in these new sets of tools and capabilities?
I will say that if you try alone as purchasing to do it, it won't fly. I think this kind of initiatives, whatever is the name that we want to give them, need to be a company initiative. If you have a company initiative, then you will have the way to align. And sometimes you decide to invest even if the return is not that good because it's a thing to do. And some other times you will do it differently. But the only way that it can move forward and get aligned and move forward is having a company approach, a company initiative. And for that, the leadership of the president, the CEO, or whoever is leading the company is critical. And is at the end of the day the person who make the arbitration, because at the end of the day, it's truth. At this stage, still a lot of arbitration, Pierre, because there are things like you decide to reduce your margin. I will say that. I will refuse to say that, but you need to move forward because is the right thing to do in order to make the evolution to the next step. I would say it's a company initiative, not only a person initiative.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And speaking of that, topic, some of the questions we're getting in kind of about CSR and resources and who owns it. Did you find that I don't know how you're organized in terms of whether you have a sustainability group or how that's kind of organized, but were some of the resources for doing CSR and funding, the EcoVadis or other things, is that something that the company had invested in other CSR resources, or is that something that you took on within procurement to, meet the need, but also to establish your own kind of supplier CSR beyond the broader CSR objectives? Is that something that you, are doing now and delegating in-house to your, to your different, team members? And sounds like that was at a category level, but I don't know if there's other kind of, another kind of CSR center of excellence that you've set up that's
in terms of the company, we have a CCR head, I will say a corporate CCR officer, because it's an important for us. And there is sitting sustainability, circularity, energy, carbon footprint, etc. Regulatory affairs, because regulatory is becoming very, very critical now in the marketplace. And also in our side, we have a mix, Pierre. We are using still some of our current resources, but reorientating. An example, the expert in buying resins, he has need to evolve to move to buy virgin resins now to buy recycled resins, and was a complete change for him, because to be dealing in Europe with you name it, now he need to go abroad the world to find this. In other cases, and I will want to rebound on that, Pierre was commenting on platforms. More and more platforms will become important for us because we cannot do everything. If you have 7,000 suppliers, I will never have the capacity and the ability to audit all of them. Then we are using platforms of data. I don't want to say the names because I don't want to make commercials, but through different platforms to get rates of sustainability, to get rates of what's the name? Luasa Pampi, help me with that. The right of vigilance, I will say like that.
The duty of care.
Yeah, which is extremely critical. You have legislation like in the USA, Pierre, that is they can put you in jail because of that, because of situations like that. So we are using platforms to have these nodes and to mitigate the risk and to make a correct assessment of where we are in terms of our supply chain, what are the steps to move forward to have a supply chain having all these regulatory needs, which are becoming more and more. I think platforms is something that we need to think as buyers for the future. We cannot do everything together. Even EcoVadis can, if you have EcoVadis and ask him to audit 5,000 suppliers, they cannot do it. We need to use more and more transversal platforms of information.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. And Pierre, I'll maybe let you kind of, offer your last kind of, insights into this. But I like this idea that you have of kind of really pushing that responsibility for CSR and digital and other things to the people in the process, to the teams, to the, as you say, maybe some of the category leads, the resin, leader, that everybody has now a responsibility to bring more innovation, bring in more digital, bring in more corporate social responsibility, to the table. At the same time, you can't just tell them to do it without having some support and enablement, and using platforms as a way to have great, apps and scorecards and workflow and analytics, but also allow you to kind of syndicate and subscribe into external content so that it can really, you can make, this is procurement 101, let the supply markets help you rather than you have to kind of, do it yourself. But Pierre, any kind of closing comments as we wrap up here in terms of centers of excellence, CSR, however you want to kind of bring us home over the goal line?
So the procurement has a key role to play in the next few years, and if only for CSR, also for going out of this crisis we're into. So the procurement teams need to be fully dedicated to that, and they should not be running around trying to understand what they're up to, what they're doing, what they're going to do next. So again, that's where you need to be organized so that you can be efficient and effective, and that's the key, because all the stakes that Julio has been describing throughout this webinar, I mean, they require full dedication. So hopefully we can help lightening the burden of management and reporting, so that you can make the most of your time as a buyer.
Yeah. Well, the journey to excellence is a journey, right? And you need to have the right tools, and it is a process. But we have run out of time. I am going to, if anybody has any final questions, we won't answer them right now, but submit them. We will get answers back to your questions that you submit in the chat. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Pierre for having me moderate. I'm very honored to be able to host this conversation. And Julio, thank you very much for your time and where you are in Albea's journey. It's encouraging to see the leadership that's happening out there, but I very much would like to thank you for your time. So thanks. And everybody have a great day, and look forward to seeing you maybe on one of these future webinars in the future. So thanks again.
Thanks, Pierre. Thanks, Julio, for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye.